sponsored in part by Pediatric Associates of Dallas. Pediatric Associates of Dallas has been providing excellence in pediatric medicine since 1971. PAD has locations in Dallas and Plano and is now open 7 days a week because taking care of kids is what we do.
The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional legal advice, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your attorney, advocate, physician, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding any medical or educational concerns.
Episode of Empower Dyslexia podcast and show. I'm Rachel Chambers.
And I'm Stephen Yearout.
And we're here to help you be better informed partners in education. On this show, we talk about dyslexia and related disorders, intervention, research, special education policy at the federal and state levels, and we also interview experts in the field. So, that being said,
we have big news.
Yes.
We are now available on all of these wonderful platforms. We had iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher. If you have an Alexa device, you can just say,
"Hey Alexa, play Empower Dyslexia."
And it'll pop up.
That's so cool.
Any pod and tune in also.
Yeah.
So you can reach us in all of these wonderful
formats.
Locations. You can hear us. So
yeah, so please tune in. We're here to help as much as we can. Okay, on the show today we have our very special guest. I'm so excited. Her name is Dr. Kelli Sandman-Hurley, and she is all the way out in San Diego, California, bright and sunny out there, I think. But she is with the Dyslexia Training Institute. So welcome to the show today, Kelli. Are you there?
I am.
Yay.
Thank
Hi.
you for having me.
Yeah, of course. We're so happy to have you. We're going to be discussing the importance of, today's topic basically is the
importance of writing proper IEP goals.
Good, attainable goals for your IEP or IAP. In private schools, in public schools, it's IEP is individual educational plan, and in private schools, if they do it in private school, like they do in my daughter's private school, it's individual academic plan. I don't know why they changed the wording, but they do.
So what you should learn today, importance of goals, what is a good goal anyway, appropriate services to surround those goals, and then we'll have some common questions around IEP goals.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome, Kelli, Dr. Sandman-Hurley. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and the Dyslexia Training Institute?
Okay. I am the co-founder of the Dyslexia Training Institute. I also have a business partner, Tracy Block-Zoretsky. And we started the Dyslexia Training Institute because we worked in adult literacy at the Read San Diego, which is the adult literacy program in the San Diego Public Library, and saw the long-term effects it has on adults. And I was there for 12 years, and after the 12 years, I decided I really wanted to help kids before they became adults with dyslexia. So we started Dyslexia Training Institute thinking that we could stay at home and teach classes online and raise our young children, and now we travel more than we ever imagined. But we have online courses, so people want to learn about dyslexia, about interventions. They want to get certified in interventions for dyslexia, being an advocate for dyslexia. They can do all of that online. And we also have 2 centers here in San Diego. It's been really rainy this year, so not quite as sunny and warm as we are.
It's been rainy here too. It's rainy.
I'm not going to complain to the rest of the country about our weather in San Diego.
Yeah.
And so we've got 2 centers here where we work with students one-on-one. We don't do as much advocacy as we used to, but we'll still go to meetings here and there, 1 or 2 clients a year. And we travel a lot around the country and beyond to whoever wants us to come out and teach them about dyslexia or interventions or advocacy.
Yeah, we got to see you in Austin
Yes.
earlier this year. It was a great, very informative portion of the
The
event.
whole conference, the whole Dyslexia Summit was so wonderful, what they put on. I learned so much and met some wonderful people like
Kelly.
Kelly, who's on today.
So, Kelly, one of the other things that y'all did a TED Talk and produced a video that has had just a few views, like what, 2.6 million views?
Yeah.
About what is dyslexia. That is amazing.
So what was your passion for that?
You know, that's kind of a funny story because I knew somebody else who had done a TED Ed video, so I just emailed them and said, "What do you think about a video about dyslexia?" And they emailed me right back and said, "Okay, here, you know, we went through this little process, and then when it finally got to the time, they said just write up to, I think I had 4 to 5 minutes." And I literally wrote it in less than an hour. And it just was just one of those days where writing was easy and it just rolled off
It
my
was meant
fingers.
to happen.
And then it just happened.
Yeah, it was meant to happen.
Because it doesn't. And that just, it worked out really well. And then they match you with an artist. So obviously I'm not the one who did the animation. And forgive me, I cannot remember his name, but he was awesome. His name's on the video.
Okay.
And then they rolled it from there. And I was not the narrator, so somebody else narrated it. So I wrote it, someone else animated it, and then TED Ed narrated it.
Okay.
Well, if you
But
don't,
it was just, somebody needed a 4 to 5 minute, a really brief explanation of what dyslexia is in a really short amount of time, because I think, it's just easy to get that message out in a short period of time. So that's what that was all about.
Sure.
Would-
We love it. Can we play it?
yeah, let's play it. Would you mind if we play it real quick?
Of course not.
Let's do that.
Let's roll it.
Take a moment to read the following. How was that? Frustrating? Slow? What were those sentences about? They're actually a simulation of the experience of dyslexia, designed to make you decode each word. Those with dyslexia experience that laborious pace every time they read. When most people think of dyslexia, they think of seeing letters and words backwards, like seeing B as D and vice versa. Or they might think people with dyslexia see saw as was. The truth is, people with dyslexia see things the same way as everyone else. Dyslexia is caused by a phonological processing problem, meaning people affected by it have trouble not with seeing language, but with manipulating it. For example, if you heard the word cat and then someone asked you, remove the C, what word would you have left? At. This can be difficult for those with dyslexia. Given a word in isolation like fantastic, students with dyslexia need to break the word into parts to read it. Fan-tas-tic. Time spent decoding makes it hard to keep up with peers and gain sufficient comprehension. Spelling words phonetically like S-T-I-K for stick and F-R-E-N-S for friends is also common. These difficulties are more widespread and varied than commonly imagined. Dyslexia affects up to 1 in 5 people. It occurs on a continuum. One person might have mild dyslexia, while the next person has a profound case of it. Dyslexia also runs in families. It's common to see one family member who has trouble spelling, while another family member has severe difficulty decoding even one-syllable words like catch. The continuum and distribution of dyslexia suggest a broader principle to bear in mind as we look at how the brains of those with dyslexia process language. Neurodiversity is the idea that because all our brains show differences in structure and function, we shouldn't be so quick to label every deviation from the norm as a pathological disorder, or dismiss people living with these variations as defective. People with neurobiological variations like dyslexia, including such creative and inventive individuals as Picasso, Muhammad Ali, Whoopi Goldberg, Steven Spielberg, and Cher, clearly have every capacity to be brilliant and successful in life. So here's the special way the brains of those with dyslexia work. The brain is divided into 2 hemispheres. The left hemisphere is generally in charge of language and ultimately reading. while the right typically handles spatial activities. fMRI studies have found that the brains of those with dyslexia rely more on the right hemisphere and frontal lobe than the brains of those without it. This means when they read a word, it takes a longer trip through their brain and can get delayed in the frontal lobe. Because of this neurobiological glitch, they read with more difficulty. But those with dyslexia can physically change their brain and improve their reading. With an intensive multisensory intervention that breaks the language down and teaches the reader to decode based on syllable types and spelling rules, the brains of those with dyslexia begin using the left hemisphere more efficiently while reading, and their reading improves. The intervention works because it locates dyslexia appropriately as a functional variation in the brain, which naturally shows all sorts of variations from one person to another. Neurodiversity emphasizes this spectrum of brain function in all humans and suggests that to better understand the perspectives of those around us, we should try to not only see the world through their eyes, but understand it through their brains.
Awesome. That was such a great video. I love that
It
video.
breaks it down very simply for people that don't understand what's happening.
And then like, oh, well, they're not just defective. They just need some help.
They need they need the proper support.
So very good. Nice job, Kelly. I loved
Thank
it.
you.
And
Yeah, it's not the child who needs to change, it's the intervention that needs to change.
thank you.
That's right.
Thank
I
you.
keep seeing a meme that says, my child has dyslexia, and my school has a teaching disability.
That's right. I
love
did
it.
Jonathan Mooney once call it dyslexia.
Just teach ya.
Yeah, and I always want to make sure I give him credit for that.
That's a
Yes.
good one. Yeah, we met him too
Yeah.
not too long
Yes.
ago. Yeah, he's hilarious. I love.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll have him on the show someday.
So
Oh.
let's get into the importance of goals.
Yes.
So just for our viewers out there that don't know, if you're in a 504 plan for dyslexia, in 504 you don't get goals.
Correct.
In your plan, it's more accommodations and then just that remediation piece of it. But when you go through,
Oh, you're not guaranteed to have goals. I
Well,
think some schools may give you goals, but it's not a guaranteed like it is when you're in special education.
in special education, when you're putting your IEP together, you get specific goals to try to reach each year. Correct, Kelly?
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the importance of goal setting and making sure that these goals are set appropriately for the
The
child.
child, yeah.
Can I actually just clarify real?
Sure.
Uh-oh. We have a lag. Okay, stand by, viewers. We're reconnecting with Dr. Hurley. So one of the things while we're waiting on to get reconnected with her, I read that, what was her mantra or mantra? Do you remember that? Crickets. I'm trying to think of it too now that I brought it up. But should I read this?
Sure.
Okay, so while we're waiting on Kelly to come back with us, we had two parents that are very active, and they're friends of ours, and they wanted us to read this. So bear with me. I'm not the best reader. I just got this like 5 minutes before the show started, but this is their call to action. So this is what they have said. These are not my words. This is what they've said, which I think is extremely important. So Texas school funding is complicated, right? We kind of know that. A lot of us do. This legislative session is critical for our voices to be heard. Unfortunately, one plan is to shuffle money versus fix it. Many may think the funding for gifted and talented is nice to have versus a necessity. This thinking could not be further from the truth. Many of our disabled students are also gifted. We call them twice exceptional, or 2E. The gifted program is often one of the few reasons our dyslexic students even want to hang in there in school. Gifted students are also at a risk for anxiety and underemployment, or unemployment, I think is what they meant. At risk for anxiety and unemployment if they cannot be intellectually challenged and be with their peers. Part of the gifted profile is a synchronized or synchronistic development. Gifted education helps train teachers, educators to better understand those needs and support those students in gifted programming and across their day. Let's fund public education instead of doing another money shuffle. Please take 2 minutes for this call to action. See, to be clear, House Bill 3 is also trying to fix special education funding, which they are for. I am also for.
Absolutely.
Texas is in huge trouble with the U.S. Department of Education. Of course, we've talked about that before on our show because of the violations. They didn't use the money for special education that the federal government gave us. But removing gifted and talented funding is not the answer. It's a bad idea, and it won't be enough anyways. We need millions to fix the special education problem. And if you just take a little bit away or the GT program away, that's not anywhere near enough to fix the problem at hand. So let's not fix one problem by creating another one, or barely fix one problem by creating another one. We are better than this, Texas, is what they said.
So
So House Bill 3, people.
there's been some, they're calling it a silent dyslexia, or stealth dyslexia is a new term that's being thrown around.
Okay.
They're talking about 2E or twice exceptional children who, and what that means is you're testing on the gifted and talented level.
You're very bright.
But you still have a disability, so they call it twice exceptional. And we need to make sure that we're still funding those programs just like we are
For special education.
Anyway.
Okay, so I think we have Dr. Kelli Sandman-Hurley back. Yay! So sorry about that. Glad you're back with us.
So right before we got disconnected, you were going to clarify something.
Yeah, so I was thinking about the IEP versus 504, and I know that you guys are in Texas, and so that's just, I'm still trying to figure out how that works in Texas.
We are too.
We'll explain it to you.
You know how because when you have an IEP, the purpose of having the goals is to make sure that there's a way to monitor the progress. So if you have a 504 and there are no goals, I don't know how you're monitoring A, the progress, and B, what's actually being done without goals. So it's confusing to me, but in a 504, you could have goals, but it's really uncommon.
Okay.
Except probably in Texas.
Well, Texas is just kind of
You're an island.
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
Here in Texas, we don't like to be told what to do. We want to do everything our way. I mean, that's just how we are. When I go into 504 meetings to add to that, I always ask, how are we measuring where that child is, where that child came in, where they're at now, and how do we know that that child is completely remediated or is able to, or at this point can be finished with their intervention? And I always get blank stares whenever I ask that question. So
You can't do it on a 504.
No, 504 is mainly accommodations. You don't
Right.
you're not even supposed to really get any kind of intervention under 504. But in Texas, you can, or you might. You might.
Well, we're getting to the place where you will.
You will. It depends on the school district. It depends on the school district.
So let's get back to importance of goals and making sure that these goals are appropriate for the child that we're setting them for.
And Kelli, I was trying to remember what your mantra. Can you tell us your mantra real quick?
The needs drive goals and the goals drive services.
So the needs drive goals.
Needs drive the goals and the goals drive the services. So when you go to an IEP meeting, you don't start with services. You have to start from the beginning and go through. You have to start with what are the needs, and the needs are based on current data. So if it's like if it's an initial IEP, you'll have a full-blown testing that you can refer to. But if it's an annual IEP, you should still have data from the teachers that you can refer to, and that data should be what drives the goals that you set. And then you also look at the goals from the year before to determine if those goals were met, and if not, why not, and then to make new goals based on that. But that doesn't mean if the goals weren't met, you just throw out that goal and come up with another one. That happens a lot too, which drives me insane, because they still need to meet that goal, but we have to look at why they didn't meet the goal and then not throw the goal out, but figure out another way to accomplish that goal if it's probably still an important goal. And then once you have those goals, then you have to determine what the services are to meet those goals. And so if you have 10 goals and then 15 minutes of service, that's not enough to accomplish 10 goals.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure on whoever's giving the services. You have 15 minutes, go.
So when
and teachers are always come up to me after presentations and say, you said there's not a limit to the number of goals, but I am this teacher who doesn't have this time. And I always feel really bad when they say that, because I never blame the teachers.
Right.
I know they don't have the resources they need, but I'm an advocate for the child sitting there, so I have to do what's best for the child, but I always feel for the teacher.
Yeah, I do too.
So when you're making goals, are you making a yearly goal? Are you making a 2-year goal? Because I know, every state has, like here in Texas, we have TEKS, which is, lesson plans that or information that child should learn in that specific grade. So, if they're going from 6th to 7th grade, we know what kind of information they're going to be and tested on in 7th grade. Are you basing your goals on where they're going to be in 7th grade, or, trying to set everything up for that? Does that make sense?
So yes, it does. It's a really good question. The purpose of an IEP is to close the gap. So if you have a 6th grader who's reading at the 4th grade level, and your goal is for a year, they should make at least a year's progress, but they should make more, because if they don't make more, then they're never going to close that gap. And if they have an appropriate service, there's no reason they shouldn't be making more than a year's progress if the services match what the goal is. So yeah, you should be closing the gap in just 1 year, less than a year's progress in 1 year is never going to close that gap. And that's just pointless, wasting time.
Well, let me jump back for a second. When you said you review the data, does that mean after a full individual evaluation, an FIE?
If it's an initial or a triennial, you probably have a full evaluation, or maybe you had an independent evaluation. But there are annuals where you might not have that, but you can still gather. You're still the teacher is still supposed to be gathering the progress on goals. So that should be data that you refer to. So you had goals from last year. What's the progress on those goals, which should be numerical values. And in the case of spelling, it doesn't have to be numerical values, but it could be something else. But there has to be data there that you can go from to build the new goals. And even if there isn't new testing. But the annual goals shouldn't have testing data from 2 years prior. It should change every year. Like the baselines should always change. It shouldn't be the same just from the first initial evaluation or the triennial. Does that make sense? To be updated is what I'm saying.
Gotcha. Okay. And so can you give us an example of a bad goal versus a good goal? Give me an example of a bad goal and then what you recommend.
Oh boy. Okay, so
of any of them.
A poorly written goal, let's say that.
Yeah.
A poorly written goal would be something that says, Johnny doesn't read well when he's not motivated.
Ugh.
Or, Johnny will read third grade text and with nothing else there. And maybe he's going into 5th grade, but you still want him to read 3rd grade text. So just something that's kind of that's the opinion. If there's okay, wait, hang on. If there's an opinion, the opinions don't belong in goals. So when you say when he's motivated, that's an opinion, that's subjective.
Right.
In my opinion, if a kid with dyslexia is still coming to school, they're still motivated. And, there needs just to be objective data. So a really good goal would be Johnny will read narrative text at a 4th grade level and answer specific types of comprehension questions with 90% accuracy 3 out of 4 times, as measured by teacher kept data, or however you want to say that. And then when you get to the IEP, you have to ask for the 3 out of 4 times for the evidence, not just one time. And then make sure it wasn't the same story read over and over and over again.
And when you're saying the IEP, I mean, when you're in the meeting and y'all are making these goals, you are most definitely, the parent is helping with writing these goals, correct?
Yes, a parent is part of the IEP team, and they have the right to give feedback about the goals based on what they see at home and based on what they're seeing with their child and based on what they understand. They are part of the team.
Well, I was reading your blog and the other night, and it said parents don't apologize for asking a question that's just simply getting clarification on what that goal is. You don't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, but what does this mean?" You say, "No, like I'm here for my child and part of the team. What do you mean by this goal? Explain that." Exactly. Right? So don't ever apologize because you're there for your child. You're part of the team. You're not there because they had
to have you there.
The other piece part of the team.
The other piece that I would add to that, and it goes right along with what Kelly's saying, is not only what does that goal mean, I always ask, how are we going to measure that goal?
Mm-hmm. That's very important too.
I want to know if we're going to say that little Johnny has met this goal, I want to know how are we determining that Johnny has met this goal?
And what's the length of time to get to that goal?
Right.
I think would also be important. Like not in 3 years, but maybe in 6 months. Can he do this within 6 months by our next meeting?
Well, you should have benchmarks too. So you can set up benchmarks to evaluate. They should be getting progress at every grading period. So every grading period, a parent should be getting a progress report about their goals. So you should know at least 4 times a year.
Okay.
So if you're not,
based on how the school's set up.
So if you're not getting those progress reports back from your school, ask for them.
Yes, please do. And I like the apology. The apology thing was interesting to me because I was listening to my client, the mom, constantly apologize, and I felt like, it's like a female thing in my experience. My friends and I apologize a lot more than our male counterparts do for being too hot.
Why do we do that? I don't know why we do that, but we need to stop.
I know, and so I don't do it as much anymore, but I notice that other women do it a lot, but I probably still do it. But I noticed the mom kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." I'm like, you are saying I'm sorry like you're a nuisance. I mean, this is your child. You're not sorry. You're here. You're part of the team. You're asking questions that are going to affect your child's life.
Yeah.
So
don't be sorry. Just
don't be sorry.
Don't be sorry for being blunt or straightforward in a nice way.
Well, you have to be respectful.
And respectful.
But
yes.
You have to be respectful, but they need to understand that you're there for a reason, and this is your child. So don't ever apologize for your questions that you're asking.
But also be respectful.
I think a lot of times what ends up happening is, and this is what I've heard, generally the mother handles a lot of these meetings.
Yes.
And they don't want to be seen as the nagging parent. Right?
Yes.
So that's why I would say that they're apologizing a lot. I don't think that the only time I've ever apologized was because of coming off too strong. Basically a bull in a china cabinet when I come into some of these meetings for my kids, but it's because those are my kids and you're not going to fail my kids. And if you're not doing something right, I'm going to be a little aggressive. So
that's an appropriate apology.
Yes.
Yeah. Excuse me for my
When I tell them, hey, I know that I've come across very aggressively, but that's not what it is. It's passion.
Right.
It's passion to make sure my child gets everything they need. So.
For sure.
Anyway, let's move on.
All right, Kelly, what else do you have for us?
So we've talked a little bit about the importance of goals and setting the appropriate goals. Now, how do we tie those appropriate goals to the appropriate services?
So appropriate, let's see. So if you have appropriate goals, then, so let's say the student has a goal for phonological processing, and then they have a goal for spelling, and then they have a goal for reading. So if they have all of those goals, then we need to, and then let's pretend for a minute that they actually have a diagnosis of dyslexia, which is quite possible and probable, or the team has agreed as they can that there are definitely red flags for dyslexia. Then we have to make sure the goals are responding to the needs of a student with dyslexia based on the data that we have. And then now that what is the service, what's the appropriate service that responds to a student with dyslexia who needs to learn the things that we mapped out in the goals. So now we have to talk about not only time, so appropriate services obviously is the amount of time that the student will receive, but what's going to happen during that time? And so that's when you have to ask a ton of questions. So how are you going to accomplish this goal? What, if we want to use the program, what quote unquote program are you going to use to accomplish these goals? What kind of training do you have in order to accomplish these goals? And what's the evidence that you have that what you're going to be doing is going to accomplish these goals for a student with this profile? So you just have to ask, I just go in there and just ask tons of questions. And of course, all my meetings are recorded. Everybody's meetings should be recorded at all times. And that's not to create a hostile environment. It's to create an ability for you to go back and listen to it, or maybe your spouse couldn't be there, or you're emotional and you feel like you need to go back and listen to it again to see if you missed anything. But you need to ask tons of questions for the record, have everything on the record via recording. And then those questions are going to tell you a lot about what the person who's working with your student understands about how to meet those goals and whether or not it's appropriate.
Wow.
A lot.
I didn't know that is that kind of like standard operating procedure, or just something that you recommend, recording the IEP meetings?
Oh, that's standard. That's
okay.
Mostly standard. A lot of people don't like to do that at the beginning because they don't want to set that tone.
Mm-hmm.
But, I always say just frame it that, your spouse couldn't be there, your sister couldn't be there. You need someone else to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
The parent. And so, you simply, if you take your kid to the doctor and they tell you all this stuff and then you walk out and you would spend all your time thinking about something else about your kid and you can't really remember what the doctor said. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
I would just frame it that way. I like to get my recordings transcribed as well. And I love to go back and read what was actually said. It's really interesting. I know not everyone can do that, but
I've done that before. I've done that once before.
I bring the transcriptions with me and just put them on the desk so everyone can see that I have the transcriptions from the prior meetings.
You're prepared.
I generally follow up with an email after our meetings saying, here's what we talked about. Mm-hmm. Here's what you said. This was your takeaways. Here's my takeaways. And make sure that I send that also on top of recording. That way there's always that paper trail. It's protection for you. It's protection for the school. Mm-hmm. One of the other things I always try to say is I want you to hold me accountable as a parent, mm-hmm. my child accountable as a student, and I'm going to hold you accountable as the school or the staff to make sure that we're all doing what we're needing to do.
Everybody's working together. Yep.
Yeah.
And you can't do that unless you have that documentation.
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely. You can't hold them to anything. They can't hold you to anything, for sure. So.
And you send that email to everybody.
That's right.
The whole team. Yes.
That's exactly
so
right.
Everybody knows that everybody got it.
That's a good tip too.
Well, and at that point, if somebody doesn't agree with something, they need to respond to that email mm-hmm. and say, that's not how I remember it. Mm-hmm. I said X, Y, Z. And that's where, the transcripts come in, because you can go, well, here's a transcript. This is what you said. This is what I said.
Right here.
There you go.
The recording that we.
Yes.
And again, this is not being confrontational. This is just being thorough.
Yes.
This is your child. This is, you only have your child in school for 13 years, K through 12, and hopefully he's going to go on to college. But I mean, for you as a parent, you have 13 years to get your child
ready,
the appropriate education for your child and move them on. Our job as parents are to raise our children and send them out in the world. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right. What's our?
Well, let's go back to these appropriate services.
Okay. So Kelly, we're on the appropriate services slide.
And that's where most people get stuck, because you've written all these. One thing I tell parents, and this isn't going to look good for me, but is I can go to these IEP meetings and I can get you a really beautiful IEP. I can get beautiful goals written, but sometimes the schools just don't have the services that are appropriate for your student. So you kind of have to go in knowing that it might be that you have this beautiful IEP, but they just don't have what they need to help your student, and you might have to consider outside services. So that's something I always try to prepare my parents for when we get to the services section. But like I said, you have to ask all those questions: what they're going to use, what it looks like, find out what ask them what they think, how they teach phonological awareness. Listen to how they're using the terms phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. Ask them how they're going to teach spelling. That's going to be your big key indicator. So you should have a spelling goal. So I'll go back to the goals for a second. Tracy and I have this great slide that says what's wrong with this spelling goal, and then it's blank, because there are so many times that people just forget to teach spelling. And I actually think that they don't put the goal there because they don't feel comfortable teaching spelling. And that's, I think it's just kind of a mechanism for them to get around something that's really uncomfortable. But if a child has dyslexia, it's really, really highly likely that they can't spell that well. And so if we don't teach spelling, we're actually creating a half literate person. And we don't want someone, and every adult that I ever worked with in the adult literacy program I talked about earlier, they all want to know how to spell. All of my students want to know how to spell. It's the hardest thing we do, but they all want to know how to do it. So the other thing I noticed in IEP meetings is I noticed that when we're going around talking about spelling goals and they're all arguing with me about whether or not we should have a spelling goal, I noticed that everyone in the IEP meeting can spell. So I'm like, here are all these people who can spell telling me that it's not that important for this kid to spell. And so, we just got to make sure we have a goal for spelling, and then that spelling goal, then ask how during the services, are they going to approach spelling? And that's going to tell you a lot about how much they understand about the English language in order to be able to teach that to your struggling student. So that's really important.
Well, I think
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think they stopped doing spelling in 5th grade. I know they don't do any spelling tests anymore in middle school. And it's because on the state standardized tests and things like that, they don't take off for spelling.
And I don't even want them to do spelling tests. I want them to teach the child how the English system works. I think spelling tests are kind of ridiculous, and the fact that all of the spelling words are unrelated. They have no relationship amongst each other, and so they're just memorizing a bunch of words. They can spell it for the Friday test and then can't spell it 2 days later.
Right.
That's really common. And what I want them to be able to do is say, you know what, we're going to teach spelling in the way where we teach how all these words have bases and morphemes and prefixes and suffixes, and how you can build word families off one base, and how it changes the grammar and the structure and the spelling and the pronunciation, how that all shifts based on what morphemes you attach to it. That's how you teach someone how to spell. And if they don't know what any of those words I just said are, then that's a red flag that the services probably aren't super appropriate for someone with dyslexia, and probably won't meet the spelling goal. But the other thing is that you can have a spelling goal, and then they'll have a program that they're using, and then they'll just put in the goal to match the program, which is really interesting as well. I've seen that quite recently. And so it didn't really make sense because the curriculum developer didn't really understand spelling either. So it's just constantly asking all of these questions. You have it all documented. So, you're just kind of going along, making sure that you're figuring out if the person working with your student really even understands how to meet these goals.
And it's interesting to me that it's changed, because I remember growing up and we did have relatable, like, word boxes. And you would, there, and there, and caught, and like all these that sounded the same or looked the same, but you change these 2 letters and it's a different word. So we're saying that they're not doing that anymore?
Well, those are homophones. So they might still do that. But what I mean by related words is you'll have a word like ACT, and then you have active and action and actually and action and actively,
Yeah.
and words like that are built on that base.
Yeah.
And so it's not different meaning. It's not different words. It's actually the same base with the same meaning, but you're changing the grammatical structure of the word by adding the morphemes. And so that way, like if you have a word like sign, SIGN, we teach it as a sight word, right? Like it's crazy because that G shouldn't be there. But what happens when we add the AL?
Signal.
It becomes the word signal. So all of a sudden the G makes sense. And then you can build words like designate and resignate and signature and build all of these words on it. And to me, that's what a spelling test should look like.
Gotcha. Interesting. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and I know that's how I build my spelling goals, but sometimes it's an unrealistic goal in the framework of who's going to be teaching it.
So do you have, because you were saying that you were teaching adult literacy, do you have a spelling program that you sell, that you do teach,
that you like,
that, our parents can look into?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's nothing that I created. It is called Structured Word Inquiry. And a lot of people are studying it now, so it's not a boxed program that you can buy. It's something that you study as an educator, and then you use the information from Structured Word Inquiry to incorporate into your lessons. So what I always tell my teachers is you go learn about Structured Word Inquiry, which is really basically just learning about how the English language is truly structured. It's nothing anybody made up. It's literally straight. Here's how the English orthography actually works. And then I tell teachers, I get that you are mandated to use some programs. I understand that. But if you go and build this other understanding through Structured Word Inquiry, you can sneak that into your curriculum. So there's a way to use this new knowledge that you get and use it with what you're mandated to use. I think that's the best way to do it. I don't mean sneak it in because I don't think it should be sneaky, but you can supplement it with what you learn about Structured Word Inquiry. And we teach it at DTI. Pete Bowers teaches it, and it's just there's if you go into our website, we have a list of people who teach it, or you can email us and we'll send you a list. There's several people who teach it. And it's all online.
Okay.
Pete's is not online. Pete goes out and trains, but most of it is online.
Sweet. Okay. Well, that might be something that we can put on our website too.
So one of the catchphrases or acronyms, I guess you'd say, for goal setting is SMART. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound.
Time-bound, yeah.
So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, in my book, I actually added reasonable. I added an extra R. Because I always say, let's try to be reasonable as well. Sometimes we go into meetings and the parents want everything, and we can't expect the school to provide everything. So let's make it reasonable as well. So yeah, it has to be something that is measurable, but it's measurable with numbers. So it has to be data driven. It has to be reasonable, relevant, and then it has to be within the year. So you have to have some kind of time restriction on it so that you can make sure that at the end of the year you have something to measure. So that's it's an acronym you can find online pretty easily if you can't remember it this quickly. But just make sure when you go through the goals that it's specific as well. One thing I'd like to say about goals as far as the SMART goal goes is you can't throw you can have as many goals as you need. So if you have 10 needs, then you have 10 goals. And sometimes when I say that, teachers freak out on me a little bit. But what that really means is if you have someone who's struggling with reading and spelling, and they need phonologic awareness, phonemic awareness, reading, vocabulary, writing, and spelling, that's 6 needs right there. But that should be 6 different goals. However, you can teach those goals all at the same time. You just have to measure them separately. So you shouldn't throw all of those things into one goal. They should be 6 different skills that are measured differently but taught at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So
The other thing is you don't. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say
to
what I'm hearing is you can teach all those same skills in the same program, but we need to make sure that we're measuring each of those skills or those IEP goals separately.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Correct?
Yes. And your goals should be written specific to the child, so they do not have to come down from a drop-down menu. I know a lot of times I see lots of goals that are just drop-down menu goals, but those should just serve as a template, and then you change it and edit it based on the specific child you have in front of you. That's the individual part of the IEP. So make sure that you're not shy about making sure it's edited for your child.
Yeah, because a lot of ISDs use a digital
Yeah, point and
program.
click.
Yeah,
Click,
well,
click,
yeah,
click.
and it's like she said, it's drop down. And I've heard that too. Well, that's not in the drop down menu. Well, we're gonna have to write it in.
Oh no,
Exactly.
let's start typing.
And just because you have 6 spaces for 6 goals doesn't mean you can't add 10 more. So, or I wouldn't say 10 more, that would be 16. I meant 4 more to get to 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, we're not. What I'm hearing from you, we're not trying to overburden the ISD with, oh my God, they're asking for so much. We're asking for each of the needs to be met.
Right.
Again, and you can teach all of those specific goals or those all specific skills within, say, inside of said program.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but we just, there we have to find out where the weaknesses still are, and we have to measure those all separately.
So I've got your what is a good goal anyway slide that will be on our website,
Good.
www.empowerdyslexia.info. So
Yeah.
we'll make sure that's up.
That's an important slide that people should see, I think.
Okay.
Okay, so what are some common questions, Kelly? And then we'll have to wrap it up.
I would say, is there a limit to goals, which is the one I just answered? No,
Yeah.
there's no limit to goals, but be reasonable, and make sure that, if someone tells you there's something like there's a limit to goals or we can't do this or do that, ask for the written policy. Ask for okay, that's really interesting. I didn't realize that. Do you have a written policy that I can read? Because I didn't know that. I mean, you could just frame it that way. I said the drop-down menu and the parent input. Those are actually the three common questions. I answered the one about the drop-down menu, and then parent input. You feel free to even write a goal and suggest it to the team, and send them ahead of time so they have some time to look over it. If you have someone you're working with, and you can come up with some goals and then send it to the team ahead of time and suggest some goals. Don't be afraid to do that.
What if the child doesn't meet his goal in that time frame that you set?
Yeah, so that's a big problem. So if they're not meeting their goals, then we have to look at why they're not meeting their goals. So don't be afraid to ask for an observation. So have someone go and observe the student during the intervention at school. Try to make it somebody the student doesn't know so that they don't know who's being watched. I always frame it that I'm watching the teacher, so no one knows the kid's being watched. The teacher actually is being watched. Not watched, observed. Different connotation there.
You said that you can write your own goal and present it to the team. What if the school or the ISD says, no, we're not going to use that goal?
That's okay. They have the right to do that, but they need to tell you why, and then maybe massage the goal with the whole team together into something that you can all agree on. There's no, they're not going to accept everything I send to them, but at least it'll start a conversation. I'm okay with that. But the not meeting the goals is a really big deal, because if they're not meeting their goals and something has to change, we have to figure out what's going on. And if they're consistently not meeting their goals, and I'm not a litigious person at all, but sometimes maybe it's time to consult with somebody higher than an advocate to see if maybe you have a case. But if they're not meeting their goals, then something has to change. We don't just change the goals or wait for the kid to change.
Right. And you said, tell me again, so you said that you go into the classroom and observe?
Yeah, so you can do an observation. So every parent has the right to have their child observed.
Parents can go in and observe?
Absolutely.
They can. I don't suggest that parents do it, because if I went into my son's class, he would act completely different if I was there. So I usually try to make sure that if I'm going to do the observation, it's not one of my clients. They don't know me, and my business partner will do it for my clients because they don't know her. But somebody can go in there and observe, take notes. I have a couple of blog posts where I actually showed exactly how I wrote it down and what I noticed. And then that's really important. And then you can either give that to the team or you don't have to give it to the team. But an observation, somebody will usually probably go with you. I usually have administrators walk me to the observation. But it's really important to see what's actually going on.
Well, I know that at my kids' school, I can go and observe. But I do have friends who their school will not let a person like you or like Dr. Housen here in Dallas. He has said that there are certain school districts that won't let him into the school to observe the student so he can get a good idea of what's going on with the student, but just for an evaluation. But so
I would challenge that.
is that like standard
I would
operating
check that.
procedure,
That is-
or why
That's
is that
not
happening?
okay.
Yeah.
And they should ask for the written policy stating why they can't go observe their child, because that is just part of being the team.
I mean, one of the other things that I would
Okay.
also add in there is ask what program are you using with my child to meet these specific goals, and I want to watch, like you were saying, observe. But I actually went and sat through. I had them teach me a lesson with the program that they were using because I wanted to see exactly what my child would be going
Was that
through.
the VHS tape?
Wow,
That
I love
the
that.
the program
So-
on the VSH tape that the kids were watching
Right.
for dyslexia intervention
So,
Right.
from the 80s.
I highly suggest that you do that. Go monitor, or not necessarily monitor, but tell them, if you're going to teach my child this, I want to see you teach it to me.
Yeah, yeah. Let me see the program that
I
you're
love
teaching.
that. That's a great idea.
And they accommodated
And
that.
they did. They said absolutely. And after we went through two different programs, and I said no, neither one of these are appropriate, and I don't think that these are going to work, and we're going to figure something out. And luckily we did.
Well, one of the programs was a VHS tape from the
Both.
1980s.
Both of them were.
Oh, both of them. So, I mean, it's kind of easy to say, no, I don't think that's going to work.
So
Things have changed a little bit, but I don't know.
That is a fantastic idea.
Well, Kelly, you've written not one, but two books.
Ew.
So tell us a little bit about your books and where can we buy them?
The first one is Dyslexia Advocate, and it is to help parents, anybody really, understand how advocacy works and how the whole process works in the public education system. And then the second one is obviously about making sense of spelling, and there's lots of ideas and practical activities in there. Dyslexia Advocate's already out. You can get that one on Amazon. Dyslexia and Spelling is being published on June 21st, and you can pre-order that one on Amazon right now.
Awesome.
I actually, last night, I added links under the important links on our website. So you can click on important links and click on either book, the icon, and it will take you straight to Amazon. So you can
So you can buy it. I'm so glad that you wrote a book that had spelling in it because I know how important that is to you.
It's
It's
I
important
know.
to everybody. I think it should be important to everybody, but I know that you like spelling a lot.
Well, it's
I really,
Good.
I really do.
what we don't realize, or what we don't even think about, is when these students get to the age of having to go fill out a job application, or you're going to the doctor and you're filling out all the medical records, or anything, you have no idea the anxiety and panic that goes through these kids, or these now at that point they're adults, minds, trying to figure out how am I going to not A, look like an idiot, and B, fill this information out to give it to somebody and not have 900 misspelled words.
Especially with a job application. Can you imagine?
I remember going in for a job
So
interview, and the person said, "Hey, here's a piece of paper. I want you to write a paragraph of why you should be here." And I was like, "This is a job ain't for me. I'm out."
Oh my gosh.
That's what they do. They avoid it just altogether.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, then that's not good. That's not good. Okay, so we have some upcoming events. So Kelly, this is one of yours, the 2019 Annual Dyslexia Virtual Conference held April 15th through May 3rd. And the keynote speaker is Dr. Marcia Henry. And then, so they're all pre-recorded workshops. And they have a student panel, so everything's on the computer, correct? So it's
Yeah,
a
so we
conference on the computer.
It's all virtual, so you can join the conference from your PJs and a glass of water or a glass of wine or whatever you want. And they're pre-recorded workshops. But what's cool about it is our presenters, you can watch the workshop and then post your questions, and our presenters will be coming in during those 3 weeks and answering your questions. So it's not as though you're just going to watch the workshop and move on. You get to ask your questions to the presenters.
So
And then you'll have 3 weeks, and you can watch all of them if you want to.
who's the intended audience for this conference?
It's anybody who's interested, and we have parents. I would say it's large percentage of it is teachers and educators, but we also have parents.
Cool.
And psychologists and speech and language. It's open to anybody.
I'm so glad that you're including parents. There's so many conferences that parents would like to go to but can't because they're parents and not educators. They get escorted out of the building, actually.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well, I'm excited about that. I'm going to go ahead and register now, and you can register at www.dyslexiatraininginstitute.org.
Yeah, and then click on virtual conference.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay. And
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. We have a couple more events that that are in our area, our neck of the woods. There's a parent resource group meeting on March 20th from 6 to 7 at Sam Houston Middle School. That's the host is Garland ISD. Participants will meet with other district parents to discuss ways to foster a connection between home and school, as well as and you can network with other parents and Garland ISD dyslexia students.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I requested Garland ISD do is
It's like a mentoring.
Yeah, our children have come with instruction books, and we need to understand how other parents are dealing with their children that have these same learning disabilities, and
bet.
what the school is truly offering, and have an open dialogue between all of us so we can have that synergy, right?
That's awesome.
The next one is the Experience Dyslexia. This is a great event. They're going to actually do a stations where you get to understand what it is about how these dyslexic students feel in the classes. That's on March 26th from 6 to 8 at Rowlett High School. Anybody, it's open to everybody, any ISD that's local or whatever can come and see a hands-on experience of what it is to be dyslexic.
Awesome. And then again, y'all, we're live everywhere. Do we need to say that again?
Well, the one thing that I want to make sure that we say is like us, subscribe.
Yeah.
It helps us with our sponsors.
Yes.
And it helps us bring us this great content like Dr. Kelly.
Yeah.
And
Excellent speakers.
Keep going.
So we're looking at getting 1,000 likes on Facebook by the end of May,
Yes.
right?
And we're at
And then also
500 and something.
Yeah. So we made it to 500, but we'd like to get to 1,000 and also on subscribers on YouTube.
Awesome.
So, okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kelli Sandman-Hurley, for joining us today and talking about IEP goals. We appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it is. It is.
We definitely want to have you back and speak a little bit more on this and other topics. Stay tuned. We'll see you next Thursday.
Yeah.
Real quick, in our ending, we always say, if you suspect a learning disability in your child, please send in a referral information to get the child tested, especially if they're struggling in school. You'll be happy, and they'll be less stressed and happy to understand that what's going on, so we can actually get them the help.
Yeah.
We have templates on our website, www.empowerdyslexia.info. And also all of the events that we talked about is on our website. So thank you, and stay tuned in.
All right.